With the power to bring people together or just help us escape the world, gaming is more than just a game. So join me, Ziggy Chris, as I speak to developers, content creators, and gamers like you and me to discover how each of us was saved by gaming. Welcome in everyone to Saved by Gaming, where life is more than just a game. I am Ziggy Chris, and with me today, Head of Communications at Happy Volcano, who are currently working on their forthcoming game Modulus, lead social media manager of Nothing Without Us, which is a non-profit aimed at building community, awareness and inclusion for accessibility and disability within games. On top of all of that, they're a Women in Games ambassador, committed to fostering diversity, accessibility and representation in gaming. And just to add one more notch on that list of things, they are also a certified accessibility consultant. So they fit right into the whole theme of this podcast. And so welcome in, Jarvs Tasker. Welcome in.
You make it sound like I'm the busiest person in the world.
Well,
Hi.
You're welcome. You're welcome. That's kind of the theme. It is. Be proud of yourself. Be proud of yourself. And
Thank you.
On top of all that, I did see this week, at the time of recording this, you're also nominated in Game Dev Heroes Progression Hero Award finalist for 2025. Yeah. So congrats.
Thank you. Because everybody in that category is just, they blow my mind. So to be with them is a real honour, genuinely. So I'm a little bit overwhelmed by that, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I couldn't not mention it. Just to, again, you make it sound even more busy and amazing. But thank you. And when I reached out to you for this discussion, one of the first things you replied to me when I was talking about the theme was gaming did literally save my life when I lost my first career to disability. And so I figured that's a great place to start. That quote was, and obviously it's as much as you're willing to share. Can you explain to me what you meant by that in terms of how gaming saved you at that point and your journey?
Absolutely. Some people who are familiar with me will know that I got into games quite late. I was 29 when I entered the game industry because I was a teacher before that. I taught drama and a little bit of music and English. Only ever really wanted to do that. Like, it was the career that I aimed for my whole life. And I loved it. I'd made it to head of department by 28. And that's not really very often done. You have to work quite hard to get to head of department. So I was really proud. I was doing really well. The school that I was in, unfortunately, did not get the accessibility requirements in for a whole year that I needed to work. But I still needed to carry on working. And it made my disability progress to a point where I was in a wheelchair full time if I'm out of the house. And teaching drama from a wheelchair is very, very tricky. If I was teaching maths or English, it would have been a different story. But when you're in a wheelchair, you can't choreograph or you can't stage manage and run around up and down, putting sets about and things like that. I just felt like I couldn't do what was best for the kids anymore. And so I had to retire from my career at 28 years old. And it was a really, really dark time. No shame saying this now, but I was suicidal. Like, I was lost, having trained so hard and worked so hard to get where I was and love it so much, because I'm one of those people that career isn't just a job. It's like a passion. Like, I live for what I do. I felt very, very, very lost. Couldn't really see a way out of it. And this was around about 2018, 2019. So I was at home with nothing to do and just started playing on my PS4 most of the day, all day. I just kind of escaped into other worlds instead of my world through gaming, and being able to sort of exist somewhere else and experience other people's stories and hardships that weren't my own and things like that really helped sort of give me a bit of clarity and a bit of a step back on how I was feeling. But also that sense of escapism and being able to just be free in a game made a big difference for me, especially when I'm talking about my disability as a physical disability, as well as I have mental health conditions as well. But the physical side of things, gaming gave me a way to do things that I couldn't do in real life, right? And that was really freeing for me. But on top of that, before the pandemic, and I don't know if you know PlayStation Access, but the UK's PlayStation channel on YouTube, I'd been watching them since they started. And at the time, they didn't really have a community like outside of their comment section. So the comment section was kind of it, and they weren't really streaming at that point either. And so I decided to sort of maybe try and build a community outside, because there was a few of us that were always in the comments, and I was like, we all bond, but we have nowhere to hang out. So I made a Discord, and then that turned into like a full-time job, basically, like not being paid for it, but it was like 40 hours a week managing that and all the socials that went with it. That community and the games we played together literally saved me. Like, it gave me a reason to get up in the morning. It gave me something to be excited about. It gave me something to be passionate about and happy about and creative about. Having other people that loved gaming as much as I did and loved these worlds and these stories as much as I did. In particular, Death Stranding was one of the games that really saved me. It came out at just the right time for me. And I think that the sense of isolation that world has was really cathartic for me at that time, because I was feeling really isolated and feeling alone, and like people didn't understand what I was going through and stuff. And I think Kojima has a real way of gut punching you sometimes with emotions, and that game really did that for me, and it gave me that catharsis that I really needed. But also it was one of those games where, like, because it was such a Marmite game and some people really hated it and some people really loved it, it was really fun to get into the discourse around it. So like within this PlayStation community, like some of us were so passionate about the game and we bonded so hard about it.
I love Kojima games anyway, but that game, yeah, the isolation of it. And I love the way he uses music. There's large periods where there's no sound, nothing. And then you're just coming down a hillside and then the soundtrack kicks in. And it's low roar and things like that. And like you say, that feeling of isolation just building. But then the sense of community when you're not with people in the world, but you are then able to interact with the items they leave. You feel like you're not alone.
Magic, that game. I literally talk about Death Stranding like every week since that game came out. I have not stopped because it is just so different, right? There's nothing quite like it. I'm quite a grumpy gamer. I like playing single player games. I'm not really a multiplayer person. I'll play multiplayer when it's like silly, like something like Gang Beasts or Duck Game and things like that. But I'm not a person that plays to play with people. But that game, the way that you connect with other people and help them in their mission and just know that everybody else exists in the same way. I can't even explain how special that felt at that time. Whoa.
You feel
gives you goosebumps.
Rewarded for supporting the community in a weird way, and also when you find someone else whose items benefit you, you get this sense of camaraderie, even though you're not seeing anyone. It's a very weird feeling, which is cool. And when someone used my zipline network that I spent hours making, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, this is amazing. Yeah,
exactly. And then leave you a little sign afterwards to be like, thanks. Yeah, that was great. And I think particularly at that time in my life, that sense of connection gave me something that I had just lost in the real world, right? And it gave me a connection to total strangers at a time when I just felt disconnected to the world. And I think I will always be grateful to that game for that. It anchored me again when I felt very lost and didn't want to be here. It gave me a reason to want that. And I think that's so special. And I don't think I could ever really explain just how much that meant to me at that time in my life. Like you said, like the music as well. The first time you walk down to Lake Knock City and the first time that a track appears on the screen and kicks in, that to me is like a core memory. Like I feel like I lived that. It's weird. It was such a experience moment for me. It felt like that moment changed everything. And I was just suddenly like, oh, wow, I'm connected to this now. And I'm really into this and really invested in this.
So you're playing Death Stranding, which, by the way, I can't wait for the second one. As we record this, we're so close to the second one. It's like I can almost touch it. But you're building this little online community around PlayStation Access because you're playing Death Stranding and you're kind of immersed in this world. How do you get to where you are now? What's the stepping stone there? Because you've said that this is the formation kind of games saving you. So you've had this epiphany with Death Stranding. What did that elevate to?
Yeah, so I realised quite quickly with what I was doing with PlayStation Access that my personality type and the skill set that I had, my creativity, worked really well in kind of managing communities and working within that space. And so I started to do a lot of research at the time to be like, okay, how can I actually get into the games industry? And realized very quickly you need like 10 years experience to get an entry-level job. So I basically decided I was going to fully commit myself to what I was doing with PlayStation Access to build like a repertoire of work, right? To show that I could do this even if I wasn't getting paid for it. I helped Access reach 2 million subscribers at the time. They'd been aiming for that for quite a while. They started streaming because they were stuck at home and they couldn't do their videos. And it was all kind of the perfect storm of the community being stuck online and wanting a place to hang out, and me having just built it. It developed very quickly into something way bigger than I imagined it being. As a result of that, Dave from Access gave me a reference, which helped me get my first job in the industry. And that gave me then purpose again. And like I said, I'm a very ambitious person and career means a lot to me. And I have to be doing something. I'm not the type that can just sit at home and do nothing. I get very bored, and work is something that I love, right? And if it's creative, even more so. I suddenly was able to do that again and start learning again and teach myself how to do things I didn't know how to do before, and all of that through games and through the community of other people that work in games, which I found very quickly is the most wholesome, wonderful community. Everybody that works in this industry that I have come across is just wonderful and really supports each other and understands that a rising tide lifts all boats and helps everybody. And it really helped reframe how I was thinking about life, how I was thinking about myself, my own value, because I realized, okay, what I am as a person isn't just tied to teaching. I can do something else. There is something else for me out there. And even more than that, I could do something in video games, which is the only other thing I have loved as much as teaching. Like, I have played video games since I was 3. Mm-hmm. And I got a little Batman handheld thing. So it was a real turnaround for me getting to do that.
Wow. That is quite the journey. It's really heartwarming to hear. And so now you kind of, I think, referred to it a little bit. It gives you, I suppose, a unique perspective potentially. And you've gone on to get this qualification in accessibility consultation. And obviously you're working within games now as a person with a disability. Do you bring anything to your community or the work that you're doing in terms of the perspective of accessibility?
Yeah, so in my first role, it was very much just community, and I felt a little bit limited by that. And so I started to look at what else I could be doing voluntarily in the industry at the time. One of the things that I personally found when trying to break into the industry is that although it's hard for everyone, when you are neurodiverse or disabled or both, it's even harder to break in because there are barriers that people don't even see unless they face them as well. For example, in the UK, a lot of our buildings are ancient and old and have ridiculous like protection things where you can't alter them in certain ways. So you can't put a lift in and ruin the stairs, for example, and things like that. So there were some places that I wanted to work that I couldn't even apply to because the buildings were not accessible and the companies were not open to remote work because they just saw it as, no, we don't want to do remote. They didn't see it as this is an access requirement. And then it's so difficult to talk about this because when you apply for roles that you know you're qualified for and you're not even taken to interview and people who are less qualified than you are, it's really hard not to think that it's because of your disability, because they know that they would have to make adaptations that they don't want to make and things like that. And it's a real difficult situation to be in because you can't prove that's the reason why. And they won't tell you that's the reason why, but you kind of know that's the reason why, if you know what I mean. Some places were just outright like, yeah, we're not going to do remote. It's not happening. Tough luck. And that was really difficult. But I stand up for myself. I'm very good at advocating for myself. And so I realized that not everybody else is good at doing that. And not everybody else wants to put the energy and the time because it's so draining into shouting about it. So that's why I, at the time, became an Into Games ambassador. That unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. Into Games does, but their ambassador program is changed. And then I also applied to become a Women in Games ambassador and got that as well, because although there are all these amazing ambassadorships for helping people break into games, none specifically at the time focused on helping disabled and neurodiverse people break in. And so what I wanted to do was get into these ambassadorships and then focus on those people within there, right? Within that space. So yes, I do women in games, but I try to focus on helping women with disabilities and neurodiversity. So that became like a real side thing for me, and literally spend all of my spare time doing that. Basically, is what can I do to help those people? I do talks at events like EGX and online events, and I do CV reviews for people. I do mentorship, portfolio reviews, like literally anything I can do to try and help other people with neurodiversity and disabilities break in, I will do it, because no one did that for me. And it was hard. So if I can help someone else, then it's all worth it.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. But then from the gaming side, if you like, and not the industry side so much, but like the customer facing side in terms of the player perspective, you're the APX, or Accessible Player Experience certification, which is from Able Gamers. Now, how does that work? What do you have to go through for the certification, and what does that actually mean? What do you do with that?
Yeah. So I was really lucky. I was accepted to do the course as a grant, so I didn't have to pay for it. They accepted me. I think they do that every time they run it. They offer a grant to 1 or 2 people, I think. So you can apply for that through their website, because I just couldn't afford to have done it otherwise, because it is a fully accredited course and you have training for, I think we had 2 weeks of training where we were there every day. And they take you through their handbook of sort of different steps that you can teach to studios, basically, and how to help studios frame their thinking around accessibility before even starting to work on it, like mechanically. And I think that is something that people forget about when they look at talking to places about accessibility, is they jump into the straight what you need to do, and they don't always talk about why you should do it and the other reasons why it's useful to you. And so I learned a lot about that, and just about how many sort of statistics, for example, about why it's useful to talk to companies about accessibility, because people who don't have access needs use X amount of features, for example, and it can help you sell your game and things like that. So these sorts of things that you can learn to sort of word it in a way that makes people understand they'll make more money if they put accessibility into their games, and then they'll listen to you.
I mean, if I to pick on that, so in terms of, let's look at, say, I'm gonna presume it's like the gold standard from what I see. I don't have accessibility issues. I'm partially deaf in one ear, but it really doesn't bother me. And so let's look at, say, Naughty Dog. Obviously, they're kind of held quite highly, massive budgets in terms of, but they've got the colorblind modes, the audio description, like so now in terms of accessibility, which is amazing. But not everyone has that kind of budget, and not everyone can necessarily reach those levels. So for the small, like you bringing it down to smaller studios and indies, like we've spoken about the quality of indie studios, but they don't have those scales. So presumably there's budget restrictions there in terms of, like you just said, about fighting for where you might potentially earn more if you put this in your game.
Yeah.
How easy is it for them to put all of these features in?
Yeah, there's a really good spreadsheet that exists that's the accessibility guide, and it has a breakdown of 3 different levels of accessibility in games and things you can do within those levels. Everybody can do the basic ones. There are things that you can do that don't take much time, don't take much energy, don't take much money. For example, giving a choice of fonts so that people can find ones that they can read easier. Making sure your contrast is really clear for people. Things like that people don't always think about, because they're thinking, I want my game to look really good, so I want this style and I want the UI to look a certain way. That's great, but if you don't give the option to change that for people that need it changed, you're blocking off a whole group of people to play it, right? And that doesn't take very much time at all. It just takes you being willing to stand down from your, I want it to look this way, you know? So that document is really, really good. And I recommend it to every single game studio, because it shows you the things that you can do straight away. Then there's the intermediate section where it gives you a little bit more of best practice, right? The things that you should be doing if you can do them. And a studio that I think really took note of this and did really, really well was Hyperliminal. They really thought about how accessibility, which is a mouthful to say. And so when you start, I'm having a mental block of the name of the game. I can see it in my head. Pine Hearts. There we go.
Yes. Okay. Pine Hearts.
When you start Pine Hearts, like literally when you start it, before you get to any kind of like menu of start, settings, anything like that, the very first thing that comes up is an accessibility option. And that came out of the fact that they just talked to people with accessibility needs and found out that too often accessibility features are either way into the settings and quite difficult to find, or they're even after a tutorial, right? You have to play through the tutorial before you get access to these. And just from having that conversation, they made a very simple decision to put these accessibility features right at the very beginning before you got into anything. And that made such a huge difference to people accessing that game, and is why they were nominated for so many awards, I think. Not just what they did, but where they put it, right? And all they did was talk to people. And that doesn't cost any money, right? Having a conversation doesn't cost any money.
It is amazing how many of these things are tucked away, really hard to find.
Yeah.
Even just from a perspective of when I stream on Twitch, I want to turn on the subtitles, can read the dialogue if they're lurking and can't listen, And I'm always amazed, even now, there's some games that just don't have subtitles. Like, how is this not a thing in this century that you don't have even just a basic subtitle? And if there isn't a background option and it's white on white at some point, oh my gosh, that's the worst.
It's awful, right? It's awful. And these are so simple to implement as well. It's not challenging. So I think when companies use it's too much money, I don't have the time, I'm just like a small team, blah, blah, blah. That is not an excuse to not have accessibility features in your game, unfortunately. Like, you just can't use that as an excuse. There are so many tools out there that have been made to make it easier for you. Dev tools that I don't understand because I don't know how to use them, but I know they exist, right? There's so many other studios that you can talk to. Like I said earlier, game dev is a community, and indie in particular is very, very good at supporting each other and sharing knowledge. So if you know a game has done really well with accessibility, go and talk to them. They're not going to safeguard it as some like ridiculous secret because they put it in and you can't. That's not what accessibility is about. If they care about accessibility, they care about everybody having access to games. And so they're going to talk to you and share how they do these things, right? And I think those conversations are really important to try and have and push people to have, right? And I think doing this APX course really got me to think about that and the different ways that you can communicate to people and why it's important. The way Able Gamers put together what they do, they have a pack of cards, basically. They look like tarot cards that have different scenarios and segments of your game broken down into very clear and easy to do steps that you can do with accessibility. And I think they were really clever with the way they did that because it's bite-sized. It's not difficult to understand. Anybody can take one of those cards and work on something and be like, oh yeah, okay, I can do this. This is not overwhelming. It's not challenging. And I think sometimes when people hear accessibility, they think, oh, I don't know anything about it, it's going to be really difficult, and they just shut down and don't do it. Where actually, if you just put a little bit of effort into educating yourself, you'll realize that there are so many things you already know how to do that you could be doing. And it's really just trying to break down those barriers. And that's why the accessibility community within games, they just inspire me so much, because everybody is out there every day on socials, at talks, at events, just constantly putting forward all these different things that you could be doing and showcasing people who are doing it well. And I think that we just need to continue to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm also a big tabletop gamer as well. Daggerheart at the moment, the Critical Role team are getting huge praise for, obviously, they've put a whole wheelchair combat section in their new core rulebook, which is awesome. I was reading the rules for it and I'm really impressed. And they're getting rewarded by the praise that people are doing on socials, the amount of TikToks and people are posting about, look at this is awesome. The option to play as a wheelchair player at the table and not have to make it from scratch, but they can actually take the concept and run with it. So it does give you kudos as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost free marketing, right? Because people are talking about it and therefore more people are going to hear about the game that might not have heard about it before. And, it's not for nothing. Yes, it helps the people access your game, but it will help you as a game studio and as well. Also, once you've learned how to do things once, you can carry it forward into your next project. And I think that's something that Hyperlumen will talk about quite a lot, is that they worked really hard on getting their Pine Hearts game to be as accessible as possible. But now the game they're working on next, they already know how to do all these things, right? They've learned these tools, they've learned how to do it, they know the systems they want to use and things like that. And so it's not time and effort anymore. It's just part of the development process. So it's just investing in that initial learning period, and then you're golden.
Yeah. So do you think, though, despite all of that we've just said about certain studios maybe not still getting things, even with the basic level right, do you think it is heading in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. You've only got to look at some of the most popular indie games in the space in the last few years. Aggro Crab, for example, they won a bunch of awards for accessibility, and that was one of the most popular indie games, and they nailed their accessibility features, right? And they didn't shout about it from the rooftops. They didn't like try and get press about it. They just did it, right? They just did it, put it into the game. The best feature they've got is they've literally put a gun in the game that just one shot kills everything. So instead of putting hard mode, easy mode, etc., they've just, if you find this difficult, here you go. You can just do this.
Have the
and
BFG.
I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
They're being celebrated for doing that. And I think you see more and more that people want to do it and they want to learn and they want to have these conversations. And I think that is so inspiring as a place to be, where we're at a place where we might not be where we need to be yet, but we're at a place where people want to be there. And I think that is really lovely to see. And a lot of people who maybe weren't aware of certain things before because the conversations weren't happening are now aware of things and aware of the way they need to think when they're designing because these conversations are happening more. And I think people like Harriet Frayling and Molly Evans, Wobbly, and all of these wonderful people that work in accessibility, because they are putting themselves out there and because they are constantly talking and having these conversations, you can't ignore it. Like, there is a space that exists within games now that is just about accessibility, and the wider community is really embracing that. And I think that's gorgeous. It's really nice to see.
Yeah. It just hit my brain, and this might be a silly question to ask, but in terms of what we've just spoken about, all of that stuff about accessibilities, do you think it seems odd that one of the biggest franchises at the moment that is arguably one of the least accessible is all the From Software games like Elden Ring and Dark Souls, and I'm thinking of that whole universe because it's so not accessible.
Yeah.
And it just seems odd that, I mean, that's a huge debate. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I am not a Souls girl, so I am very biased when it comes to this because I do not like those games, mostly because of that, right? They're not accessible. I feel like they're difficult for the sake of it rather than difficult to learn, if that makes sense. And I almost feel like there's this the whole get good, like, thing around them is very ableist. And I don't think people really realize that. And it reminds me a lot of sort of the way we use language and how things change over time, and how, you know, when we were kids, people used to use gay as a derogatory, like, oh, that's gay, when they meant something was rubbish, right? And over time, people have learned that that is an awful thing to do, and that has been erased from our language now, right? And I'm hoping that this whole get good type thing is one of those types of things where people aren't really thinking about it because they're not trying to be ableist. They're just thinking like, oh, that person's crap at the game, not that person has a cognitive difficulty and can't keep up with something that's happening because their brain doesn't work fast enough. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's more of a ignorance than a malice. And I think that hopefully in time and education will change. And I do genuinely think it is ignorance, not malice. I think it is people just not understanding that what they're saying is ableist, in the same way that kids using the word gay in the 90s didn't actually understand that they were being homophobic. It was just a word to them that they were using, right? And I think hopefully in time and with education, that will change. Because you're right, like, those games just are so inaccessible to so many different types of people, even just from the time invested to get good, right? Some people cannot spend that amount of time in front of a computer or on a desk or whatever for pain reasons, or they might have nerve issues with their hands and can't use the controller and the keyboard and mouse for long periods of time, right? So they can't master because they can't practice. Or it might be, like I said, cognitively, like you just cannot think quick enough to do the parries that are required to be good. None of these things are considered when people are talking about difficulty mode. They're just like, oh, it shouldn't be easier. These games are supposed to be hard. And it's trying to break that down into, well, actually, these are the reasons why this needs to happen, because this game is a masterpiece and people should be able to access it and experience the world and the lore and everything else like that without hitting a barrier that is no fault of their own. And we just need to keep educating. I will never play those games because I hate them. But for the people that want to, they should be able to.
Yeah, and it just came to mind as we were talking because it's, you think of Elden Ring, there is a beautiful art style there in a weird way. There's a grotesque beauty to it all, and huge
absolutely.
world to explore and all of that stuff. But it is, like you say, it's kind of behind a barrier almost. I think that stems as well, like we're talking about, from the studio level as well, right? Because at the end of the day, they need to make a choice to put some things in there. It's just not even an option.
Yeah. Obviously, I don't know Miyazaki and the other people that are working there, but there has to be some sense of pressure for them from the community that is so vocal against there being accessibility features and their core audience they see. And so really, though, that community that is loud isn't the majority. They're just loud. And I think that is something that we as game makers need to be very aware of. Just because there's a loud portion of the community shouting about something, it doesn't mean that's how everybody is feeling about something. We have a responsibility to look at the wider community that are playing our games and talk to them and find out. Like, community managers exist for a reason. Like, we're supposed to find out how the community feels about games. Where's the person at FromSoft doing that? Where's the person talking to people and finding out why this community isn't playing their game? Like, I don't see those conversations happening. And until those conversations are happening, nothing's going to change behind the scenes. And I think that's really important. And also, the publishers have a responsibility to make that happen, right? Like, it's not just the studio. If you're publishing a game like that, you should be thinking about these things as well and having those conversations. And I don't see that happening on a publisher level with that game either. We need to keep pushing. We need to keep pushing.
Yeah. Okay, so let's try and lighten the spirit now a little bit, because that got very deep for a second. Have you heard, witnessed, or seen any kind of stories from your community about the impact of a game or a way communities come together, or just a positive tale that you thought, like, oh, that's why we do this, or that's good?
Yeah, quite a lot, actually. I think more so from like being part of game communities. I think I've seen, like, during the pandemic, for example, gaming was a way that we were able to stay connected to each other, because we would always talk to each other online because those friends are all across the world, right? They're not people you would see every day. And it also deepened those friendships and made people realize just how real those friendships are and how important those friendships are, and brought people together in a way that was deeper, I think, than it had been. I think the very first time the PlayStation Access Army, which is what we call ourselves, the Access Army, met up at EGX in real life, it was one of those moments where it was like, this is special. Like, we're not just a group of usernames on Discord. We're actually a real group of friends that celebrate and love each other very, very much. And that has all come through a love of games and an experience of a certain period in time. We always meet up at EGX. Even now, I'm no longer in charge of that community. My good friend Jack, I handed it over to him because I just couldn't manage it at the same time as working full time, but I'm still part of that community. We meet up every year and it's the most wonderful thing. People come from all over the world and it's like 70 to 80 people walking around EGX together. Occasionally we'll actually see Access there as well, which is really nice. They love seeing the fans all together. And it's just a real, like, this is something really tangible and wonderful and magic. And we've helped each other get through a really difficult time. And we're bonded because of that. And I think that was beautiful. And then equally, like, on a game side of things, I think games that allow you to just be silly have done that quite a lot. So Duck Game, which I mentioned earlier, did that for us as a community. It was one of those games that just lets you turn your brain off and just be stupid. Just be stupid. Run around as a little pixelated duck, blowing each other up, shooting each other, and then quacking over your corpses. It's just nothing more glorious. So, yeah, those games really made a difference to everybody and really cheered us up in times that were really difficult. And I think it can't be overstated just how much we need those silly games sometimes, and how, like, things like Gang Beasts and the new one that's like Gang Beasts but Animals, those sorts of games are really special and they really help foster that sense of community and that sense of fun and laughter and joy. And I think they're wonderful because of it. So, yeah. But I got one more. I'm going to keep going. Sorry.
Okay, last
the
one.
other thing, my wedding. So I got married in 2023, and the PlayStation Access community leaders, so all the mods and stuff, all came to my wedding from as far away as Texas and Ireland and all over the place. And that was, like 4.5 years after we started the community. And to have been together for 4 years through just playing games online together, talking to each other on Discord, like being in the PlayStation Access chat during their live streams, and then to be at my wedding and have some of them as my groomsmen. Because most of my mates have dudes, so I had bridesmen instead of bridesmaids and a maid of honor. And it was one of those moments where I was just like, I created something really special with that community, and it stood the test of time, and we are lifelong friends. Mm-hmm. And to be at my wedding 4 years later and have people here from the other side of the world who have traveled here just for this, it just felt incredible, absolutely incredible, and very grateful for it.
That's amazing. I love hearing that stuff. And yeah, I think the pandemic was an interesting time for gamers, because I feel like we were already, like you said, kind of ready built for that in a way, because we were already doing stuff online together, and it was quite easy to just continue that and elevate it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because you're already talking through your headsets and just hanging out. And those were kind of weirdly, therapeutic times, in a strange way, those moments. And you mentioned Gang Beasts, and it just brought another flashback to my brain on a personal level. I used to, in a former life, manage a cinema. And so we would have staff nights where I'd bring in a console and rig it up to the big screen. So we'd have gaming nights on the cinema screen. And we'd
Amazing.
Gang Beasts was like the hit. It was obviously Gang Beasts with a bunch of people on a cinema screen scale. Amazing.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah. Many a good time.
That sounds amazing.
Many just to make everyone out there jealous.
Yeah.
So this has been pretty awesome. Last couple of things. You mentioned Death Stranding earlier, but which would be any other games that have kind of hit you in terms of just being, whether it's for the escape, the therapeutic, the relaxation, any other key games you want to mention in terms of games that have pulled you through?
Yeah, Sable. That came out before I worked at Raw Fury, so I can say this without being biased. Mm-hmm. I've worked on post-launch stuff with it, but when it first came out, that game was magic for escapism for me. I think it just transported me completely into another world that was so beautiful and colourful and gorgeous and different from ours. That was a real transformative experience. That was, I think, Shedworks are masterpieces. That they just create beautiful, beautiful games. And so, yeah, that was really special for me. And then Hades.
Oh, yeah.
Is my favorite game of all time. That game just blows my mind. It's one of those, I think just the pure gameplay in that alone is one of those where I can just get into a flow state and just turn off the world, right? And just be like, I just need to beat this boss, or I just need to do this. But it's so masterfully executed that you can completely turn off, because you never get to a point where you feel like it's unfair or it's frustrating in a way that you can't learn from with Hades. I just loved it.
I'm only laughing because I suck that bad at it. So, and I really struggled with Hades. Just going to say, even with the...
I did to begin with, but I learned. I think I'm weird. With Souls, I get really angry if I die. Really angry, because I feel like it's completely unfair. But with Hades, I was like, yeah, it was probably my fault. I was stupid. And then I learn from what I did and go back and try again, and it's different. Because I do feel like I've learned, and I can try something different with the different skills and weapons and things like that. But also that game, the narrative was so compelling. It was so well written. And I was so obsessed with that game. I completed it once, and as in did 10 kills of Hades and got the final ending sort of thing. And then did it again on another console and did it again on PC. Having done, I don't even know how many hours that is at that point, but I was still getting new dialogue.
Wow.
Like, how am I still getting new dialogue at that point? It's Supergiant are masters of their craft. Their writing is insane. Their voice acting is wonderful. Love that game so much.
Yeah, they are a great studio. And yeah, I know so many people that love Hades. And I played a fair bit of it, but honestly, I suck so bad. So it's not really my forte, let's say that, shall we? And is there another person out there you'd like to hear their Saved by Gaming story? Is there any other people, whether it's someone you've worked with or people that you just admire from afar, and you're like, oh, I bet they've got a good saved story?
That's a really good question. One of my favorite people in the whole industry is Renee Haberman, who made Domekeeper. His love of games is just so beautiful because he can really talk about things in a way that really enlighten you and just make you love the whole industry even more. I would love to hear his story. I think that would be incredible to listen to. And then Susie Macbeth. Susie Macbeth is the CMO at Raw Fury. She has an incredible story and is one of the most inspiring people I've ever worked with, and genuinely has a real love of games. I think listening to her story would be brilliant, because I know her story of how she got into games, and that alone is inspiring, but I bet she's got a really good saved story. I think she'd be excellent. And just the fact that she's a woman in a C-suite position in games, like, people need to hear more from her. Mm-hmm. So yeah, those two, I think.
I will not at all be hitting them up soon. So yeah, thank you very much, Jarvs, for chatting with me today. It's been amazing. I really have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoyed it too.
Me too. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Not at all. It's been my pleasure, and I hope everyone out there stays safe. And just remember, everyone, take care out there, and remember to hit save. See you next time. Bye-bye. This show was brought to you by me, Ziggy Chris. So thanks very much for listening. You know how to do podcast things by now, so if you liked this, push the button, tell your friends, do all that jazz, and we'll see you next time. Take care.